The purpose of our reading today and why we're learning about the Great Migration is to try and figure out how people moved into what was considered Oklahoma when it became a state in 1907. When we talk about the Great Migration, we're talking about a mass exodus or movement of African Americans from the southern United States to other parts of the country that took place from the early 1900s to 1930. What this reading is talking about, the overview discusses that the migration was a watershed in the history of African Americans. A watershed means that it's a pivotal moment or a turning point in that history. When we go through here, we're going to talk about why people left the South, what were the push factors that were pushing people from the South to other parts of the country, and what were the pull factors that were drawing people to other parts of the United States from the southern United States after the Civil War ended. If you're following along, now I'm in the tab titled Leaving the South. And what I'm looking for when I'm looking for this are those push factors. Remember, push factors are events that are out of the control of the people who are migrating, but something that is pushing them out of their home or the place where they live currently. Pull factors, on the other hand, are reasons or incentives that would draw people to move to a certain place. So when we read here in Leaving the South, it says that several factors precipitated one of the largest population shifts in the country's history. In 1898, the tiny boll weevil invaded Texas and proceeded to eat its way east across the South. Crops were devastated, thousands of agricultural workers thrown off the land, and the long reign of King Cotton as the region's economic backbone was finally brought to an end. And I'm going to pause there, and if I'm taking notes, which you might want to, I want to jot down that this tiny boll weevil, which is a bug, killed all the crops that were across the South during that time. You have to remember that in the South during that time, cotton especially was the economic backbone of the South. So if a bug has killed all the crops, are there jobs for African Americans? Probably not. So the boll weevil is going to be a push factor driving people out of the South. It goes on to say that even more important was World War I. Its onset in Europe in 1914 brought a halt within 3 years to the massive immigration of European industrial workers, which had been going on for some 60 years. By 1900, more than 1 million were settling in the United States each year. Although the country didn't enter the conflict until 1917, it had been supplying the European combatants since hostilities began. The cessation of immigration resulted in an acute labor shortage at a time when workers were needed to gear up the arms and war supplies industries. That just means that we were supplying Europe with supplies to have a war, and at this time, we didn't have those workers. So the war created an economic boom, and an alternative supply of labor was needed to meet the increased demand. The South, with its surplus of workers resulting from agricultural disaster and chronic underdevelopment, clearly fit the bill. So that is another factor that's pushing people out of the South. There are no jobs. Let's scroll back up and let's go and see another section of the reading. When we click over to migration fever, we want to notice some of the pull factors that were drawing people away from the South, not only that the boll weevil was pushing them away. So it says, as reports spread of plentiful job opportunities that existed above the Mason-Dixon line, the worker situation began to change. They heard fantastic promises, but were cautious and awaited reports from pioneers who went north to test the waters. One worker said, "Of course everything they say about the North ain't true, but there's so much of it true, don't mind the other." Every conceivable method was used to draw the black labor supply from the South. Labor agents from Northern companies stood on street corners offering train passes to the young, male, and strong. It soon sparked a migration fever. Black newspapers carried job advertisements touting good wages and other advantages of living in the North. They also published success stories about recent migrants already making more money than they had ever dreamed possible. Their letters confirming success were read out in churches, barbershops, and meeting halls. Southerners soaked up all the information available. Was this real? Would they pay? What was it like up north? So if we pause here, we can see that jobs in the North were a huge pull factor for drawing people from the southern states. We also see that people were providing train tickets for migrants to come from the South to the North. In addition to going north, African Americans also migrated west toward Oklahoma. When Oklahoma became a state, there was opportunity for land. There weren't already established towns. So there were a lot of African American communities that developed in Oklahoma. And that's where we're going to start talking about the Greenwood District. Within Tulsa, the Greenwood District, otherwise known as Black Wall Street, was a booming metropolis within another city that made African Americans wealthy, successful, in a space where they otherwise may not have been.